The bright lights beamed down on Carrie Underwood as she stepped onto the stage of Live Tonight with Melanie Hayes. The audience erupted in applause, eager to see the country music star. Dressed in a sleek navy pantsuit, her blonde hair framing a composed face, Carrie walked confidently to her seat. She had done countless interviews over the years. After all, she was a Grammy-winning artist with a devoted fan base. But something about this one felt different. Melanie Hayes, the host, was known for her sharp interviews. She had a reputation for pushing boundaries, asking tough questions, and sometimes even putting her guests on the spot in ways that made them uncomfortable. Her show thrived on viral moments, and tonight, Carrie was her target. At first, the conversation felt light and easy. Melanie asked about Carrie's latest album, her upcoming tour, and how she balanced being a musician and a mother. Carrie answered with warmth, her voice steady and genuine. She had done this before and knew how to keep things professional. But as the questions shifted, the energy in the room changed. Melanie's smile grew sharper, and her words took on a different tone. "You've been pretty open about your personal values," she said, leaning forward. "Do you think it's responsible for someone in your position to share such strong opinions? Don't you worry about pushing people away?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The audience murmured, sensing the shift. This wasn't just a casual conversation anymore. It was a test. Carrie didn't flinch. She had faced difficult questions before, and she knew better than to react too quickly. Instead, she took a breath and smiled gently. "I believe everyone has the right to their own opinion," she said calmly. "As an artist, my job is to share my truth, not to tell others what to believe." A few people in the audience clapped, appreciating her poised response. But Melanie wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair, tilting her head slightly. "Fair enough," she said, though her voice carried an edge. "But don't you think that by being so outspoken, you could alienate some of your fans? Couldn't it make you seem out of touch?" Carrie remained steady. She could see what was happening. Melanie was trying to corner her, to make her question herself. But Carrie wasn't easily shaken. "I trust my fans," she replied with quiet confidence. "They've supported me for years because they know who I am. Just like I respect their choices, I trust them to make their own decisions." The tension in the room thickened. Melanie had planned this moment carefully, but Carrie wasn't playing into it. She was calm, composed, and ready. The interview was just beginning, but everyone in the room could feel it. This wasn't going to go the way Melanie had expected. Melanie's eyes gleamed as she leaned forward slightly, sensing an opportunity. She had set the stage, and now it was time to push harder. "But what if your truth doesn't align with progress?" she asked, her voice smooth but pointed. "Aren't you worried that holding on to certain beliefs might make you seem outdated?" The audience tensed. Some people sat up straighter, sensing that the conversation had reached a critical moment. Others glanced around, curious to see how Carrie would respond. Melanie had crafted the perfect question, one that could make Carrie stumble if she wasn't careful. But Carrie didn't blink. Instead, she let the words hang in the air for a moment before tilting her head slightly, as if considering them. Then, with a small, composed smile, she repeated, "Outdated." Her voice was calm, almost thoughtful, as if she were tasting the word for the first time. "That's an interesting word," she continued. "You see, I don't think values like kindness, integrity, and faith ever go out of style. To me, staying true to who I am isn't about being outdated. It's about being grounded." A wave of applause broke out from the audience. Some people even let out quiet cheers. Melanie's expression flickered, just for a second. But she quickly recovered, masking her surprise with a tight smile. She hadn't expected Carrie to respond so smoothly, let alone turn the question back on her. Carrie wasn't done. She leaned forward slightly, her expression kind, but firm. You know, Melanie, it's easy to label someone's beliefs as outdated when they don't fit into a particular narrative. But aren't we all here to celebrate diversity? Not just in how we look, but in how we think. The air in the studio shifted. Even Melanie, usually quick with a sharp response, hesitated for a fraction of a second. She opened her mouth, but no words came out right away. Carrie's voice grew steadier, her presence commanding yet graceful. We live in a world where people are quick to argue, quick to assume the worst. I think we've forgotten how to have real conversations, ones where we don't have to agree on everything but can still respect each other. The room was silent. But this wasn't the uncomfortable kind of silence. It was the kind that followed a truth so clear, so undeniable, that no one dared to interrupt it. Even Melanie seemed momentarily thrown off balance. Carrie sat back slightly, her confidence unshaken. I don't expect everyone to see the world the way I do. I just share my music, my story, and my beliefs. If people connect with that, great. If not, that's okay too. But one thing I'll never do is apologize for being who I am. The audience erupted into thunderous applause. Some stood clapping, showing their support. Melanie forced a smile, but it was clear she had lost control of the moment. Carrie had turned the tables and now the entire room knew it. Backstage, the energy was buzzing. The production team exchanged glances, already sensing that something big had just happened. Carrie Underwood had walked into the interview as a guest, but she had walked out of that conversation as something more, an example of grace under pressure. One of her assistants leaned over to another and whispered, "This is going to explode online." And she was right. Before the show had even finished airing, clips of the interview started circulating on social media. Within minutes, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram were flooded with posts. Hashtags like #Carrie Underwood Clapback and #Authenticity Matters began trending almost instantly. Fans and casual viewers alike couldn't stop talking about how calmly and confidently she had handled Melanie's sharp questions. Carrie just gave a masterclass in handling tough interviews, one person tweeted. She didn't get angry. She didn't flinch. She just stood her ground with grace. Another comment read. News outlets quickly picked up the story. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Headlines ranged from "Carrie Underwood stands her ground in heated interview" to "Country star's viral response stuns talk show host." The debate spread beyond music fans. Now journalists and media analysts were weighing in on the ethics of Melanie's interview style. There's a difference between tough journalism and trying to ambush a guest, one commentator said on a morning news show. Carrie Underwood showed the world how to stay poised and confident, even under pressure. But for Carrie, the most meaningful responses weren't coming from the media. They were coming from everyday people who saw themselves in her words. One message stood out. A young woman from Montana wrote, "I've always struggled to speak up for myself, but watching you stand your ground made me realize I don't have to be afraid to share my truth. Thank you." Carrie smiled as she read it. That was what really mattered. Not the headlines, not the trending hashtags, but the fact that her words had meant something to someone. Meanwhile, the reaction to Melanie Hayes was different. Clips of her looking visibly stunned during the interview were shared widely, often accompanied by captions like, "When your plan backfires." Some of her regular viewers began questioning her approach. She clearly wanted to trap Carrie, but it completely backfired. One comment read, "Melanie Hayes lost control the second Carrie started speaking the truth," another person wrote. Some even called for Melanie to issue a public apology. She didn't respond, but the backlash was growing. Carrie, however, stayed above it all. When reporters caught up with her outside a Nashville recording studio and asked for her thoughts on the viral moment, she simply smiled. "I'm just grateful people are talking about the importance of kindness and respect," she said. "That's what really matters." Her humility only made people admire her more. The moment was no longer just about an interview. It had become something bigger. Carrie had sparked a conversation about authenticity, grace, and the power of standing firm in what you believe. A week after the interview, Carrie Underwood sat on her back porch in Nashville, sipping tea as the sun set over the rolling hills. The chaos of the past few days had finally started to settle, but the impact of that moment on Live Tonight was still echoing everywhere. She had watched as the conversation expanded far beyond herself. It wasn't just about her anymore. People were talking about respect, authenticity, and the courage to stand firm in a world that often pressures people to conform. Her manager had suggested capitalizing on the buzz by doing a follow-up interview with a friendlier host, maybe even a short documentary about the power of speaking out. But Carrie wasn't interested in chasing the attention. She didn't want to exploit the moment. Instead, she wanted to do something meaningful. A few days later, she made an announcement. A portion of her upcoming tour proceeds would be donated to organizations that support open, respectful discussions and help young people find the courage to express themselves without fear. She wanted to turn this viral moment into something that could actually help others. The response was overwhelming. Fans flooded her social media with messages of support. "This is why I love Carrie," one person commented. "She doesn't just talk about values, she lives them." "She turned a difficult moment into something positive," another fan wrote. "That's true character." Even some of Melanie Hayes' regular viewers, people who had initially supported her tough interview style, started seeing things differently. Some admitted they had underestimated Carrie. Others admitted they were disappointed in how Melanie had handled the interview. Meanwhile, Carrie stayed focused on what truly mattered. One evening, she scrolled through messages from fans and came across one that stopped her in her tracks. It was from a teenage girl in Ohio who wrote, "I've always been afraid to speak up because I worried people would judge me. But watching you in that interview showed me that I don't have to be loud or aggressive to be strong. Thank you for teaching me that I can be firm in who I am without tearing others down." Carrie smiled, deeply touched. This was why she did what she did. This was what made everything worth it. She picked up her phone and typed a simple message to her fans. "Thank you all for your kindness and support. Remember, standing up for yourself doesn't mean tearing someone else down. It means showing the world who you are and letting that speak for itself. Stay true to you." Within minutes, thousands of people had shared it. Fans began posting their own stories of times they had found the courage to stand up for themselves. The message had grown beyond Carrie. It had become something bigger. And as she stepped onto the stage for her next concert, the roar of the crowd reminded her of one undeniable truth. Sometimes, the strongest voice is the one that speaks with grace, honesty, and quiet conviction.